أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Reflections on the Risale-i Nur by Bediuzzaman Said Nursi podcast series. This is Mustafa Tuna. You can listen to the episodes of this series wherever you listen to your podcasts or at the website www.reflections-rn.org. In this episode, inshallah, we will begin reading the 15th word. This word is the Ustad Nursi's commentary on a verse from the 67th chapter of the Qur'an and the 5th verse, and it goes, وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحَ وَجَعَلْنَاهَا رُجُومًا لِشَيَاطِينَ, and then continues. So inshallah, we are going to read this, and it is an introduction, in a sense, to the study of understanding of angels and spiritual beings. There is a longer discussion about this that is going to come, inshallah, in the 29th word. This connects to the earlier treatises that we read, in which Ustad Nursi was exposing the miraculousness of some of the verses that have been subject to objections, and showing us that they are not what these people who object to them think. They are actually miraculous, and they are expounding magnificent realities. So this continues in the same line and teaches us, shows us how this verse is expounding some magnificent realities. So let's go. 15th word. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحَ وَجَعَلْنَاهَا رُجُومًا لِلشَّيَاطِينَ. We have adorned the lowest heaven with lamps and made them missiles for stoning Satans. Ey kozmografyanın ruhsuz meseleleriyle zihni darlaşan ve aklı gözüne inen ve şu ayetin azametli sırrını o sıkışmış zihninde yerleştiremeyen mektepli efendi. Şu ayetin semasına 7 basamaklı bir merdivenle çıkılabilir. Gel beraber çıkacağız. O you the school gentleman, whose mind is constricted by the spiritless matters of astronomy, whose intellect has descended to his eye, and who cannot fit the tremendous secret of this verse in his constricted mind. The firmament of this verse can be climbed with a ladder with 7 steps. Come, we will climb together. So here Ustad Nursi is responding to people who grew up, studied at schools, and grew up in a context where science was considered to be the ultimate authority, to which every knowledge, every idea had to be taken in order to be evaluated and judged. So the verse says, we have adorned the lowest heaven with lamps and made them missiles for stoning Satans, and this has usually been interpreted as comets stoning the jinn and the Satans among the jinn, or other satanic beings trying to ascend to the heavens, and them being chased from there. And based on prophetic traditions, we understand that before the Prophet ﷺ was born, some of the jinn were able to do this, and they would actually ascend to the heavens and listen to the angels communicating among themselves about affairs that were to happen in the future, and then they would learn this like spies, and come back to earth. And sometimes they would also communicate with oracles among the people. So this is how and where the oracles got their information. But when the Prophet ﷺ was born, that came to an end. The narrations that tell about how there were so many comets when he was born are interpreted in this way. So these gentlemen, these schooled people who attend schools and learn about various sciences, astronomy among them, hear about this and they say, well, no, these are just comets. They happen to be traveling in space, and when they enter the atmosphere, the friction from the piece of rock moving so fast in the atmosphere burns it, and light comes out, etc., etc. So they give us an explanation that is completely physical and material, and we do not deny that does happen, right? But they would also say this is the extent of knowledge we can and should have. Anything beyond this is they would say hasha, God protect, nonsense. Anything beyond this is hearsay, fairy tale, right? So they don't get, actually they don't want to get the dimension of things that are beyond the physical substantive world in which we live. And because they block their minds from being able to process anything that goes beyond the physical world, they cannot do it, right? If you say, I'm not going to do this, say, there's a book that's put in front of you. It is filled with tremendous knowledge, so useful that if you read it and implement it, you're going to be rich and happy and wealthy and healthy, everything. But if the person says, no, I will not read that book, I do not believe that there is anything useful in that book, how can that person benefit from this? So this is a matter of blocking, a prejudiced blocking of information that makes sense, compatible with reality, therefore is truth and truthful and useful and beneficial, etc., but they won't take it. So Said Nursi says, look, the school gentleman whose mind is constricted, see, it's blocked, it's narrowed down, whose mind is narrowed down by the spiritless matters of astronomy, intellect has descended to his eye. And elsewhere, Said Nursi says, those who search for the reality of everything in physical matter, their intellect has descended to their eyes, and the eye is blind. The physical eye, the bodily eye, is blind in metaphysical affairs. So intellect has descended to his eye, and who cannot fit the tremendous secret of this verse in his narrow mind, constricted mind? The firmament of this verse, the sky of this verse, can be climbed with a ladder with 7 steps. Come, we will climb together. First step. Hakikat ve hikmet ister ki zemin gibi semavatında kendine münasip sekeneleri bulunsun. Lisan-ı şer'ide o ecnaz-ı muhtelifeye melaike ve ruhaniyat tesmiye edilir. Reality and wisdom demand that the heavens should have fitting inhabitants, suitable, appropriate inhabitants, just as the earth does. Right? The earth has inhabitants. We are here on earth as inhabitants of the earth. There are animals, birds, plants, conscious beings that living and conscious beings. And not only rocks and minerals, inanimate objects, but also living and conscious beings who interact with this world and in some cases observe it and appreciate it. It goes all the way to the various faculties that the human being has. So this is the case with earth. And Ustad says, reality and wisdom demand that the heavens should have fitting inhabitants just as the earth does. So this assumes that there needs to be a continuity, there needs to be a similarity between the earth and the heavens. Why? Somebody may come and say, I don't think that there has to be such a parallel between the world and the heavens. Well, to understand this, we have to remember that we are reading the 15th treatise, the 15th word in this book. We have established until this point, that everything in this world and the heavens are created by God. And one of the wisdoms that most significant wisdoms that we can deduce about the creation is that it manifests the names and attributes of God, and the majesty, beauty, and perfection in this manifestation entails that there be appreciating spectators, appreciating conscious beings who behold this majesty, beauty, and perfection. And the function or the place of the human being in the entire creation is to be the best of, most capable of those appreciating spectators. And then the animals are doing that too, the plants are doing that too. So each and every one of these living objects, living beings, in one sense are the recipients of that beauty, majesty, and perfection through their senses, to the extent that they can sense it. I mean, even the plants have certain senses, and on the other hand, it is to manifest it in their own existence, in their own being. So the loop, if you will, of creation closes with the existence of this appreciating spectators. And this is how God creates. So the continuity comes from both the earth and the heavens being the artifact of the same creator. We look on earth and observe things and see how he creates, and then it makes perfect sense. Wisdom demands, reality of the situation demands that it makes perfect sense that if this is the case on earth, it will be the case in the heavens too. There will be fitting, suitable inhabitants, just as the earth has those inhabitants. In the language of the Sharia, those various species are named angels and spiritual beings. Sharia, the path that the Prophet ﷺ taught us based on what he received in revelation. So in the terminology of the religion, right, they are named angels and spiritual beings. Malaika, angels, malak, and ruhaniyat. Ruh is spirit, so ruhaniyat are spiritual beings. They may be various things. We may not know the quiddity of what they are, especially the category of spiritual beings. It's broad, and probably we don't have the ability to exhaust it, right? But they are living, conscious beings who have the ability to sense the beauty, majesty, and perfection that's in the creation, and depending on their abilities to appreciate it or to benefit from it. And that benefiting, even if it is it's a form of benefiting without consciousness, such as in the case of the plants, right? Even when that is the case, their benefiting is a kind of appreciation, right? And then later on, inshallah, we will see that all of these beings have appointed angels that consciously perceive and present that appreciation to God too. But let's leave that on the side for the time being. Let's try to grasp that if the earth that we observe and see has these inhabitants who are conscious living beings who can perceive and appreciate and benefit, and if the earth and the heavens are created by the same creator, which we established up, until this point, then it makes perfect sense. That is, reality and wisdom demand that the heavens should have fitting inhabitants just as the earth does. And again, they are called angels and spiritual beings. Evet, hakikat öyle iktiza eder. Zira zemin küçüklüğü ve hakaretiyle beraber zihayat ve zişuur mahluklardan doldurulması ve ara sıra boşaltılıp yeniden zişuurlarla şenlendirilmesi işaret eder. Belki tasrih eder ki şu muhteşem burçlar sahibi müzeyyen kasırlar hükmünde olan semavat dahi zişuur ve zevil idrak mahluklarla doludur. Yes, reality entails such, because that the earth is filled with living and conscious creatures, then it is emptied from time to time and livened up again with conscious beings, right? So it's filled with these conscious creatures, but then they die, it's evacuated, but then others come, and then we see this livening up with conscious beings. Despite its smallness and lowliness, points out, rather clarifies, that these heavens that are in effect adorned fortresses with magnificent constellations are also filled with conscious creatures who have comprehension. So Ustad Nursi is likening the heavens to fortresses or palaces, adorned fortresses or palaces with magnificent constellations. Now, the word for constellation in Turkish is burç, and the word for fortress tower is also burç. So there's a word game here that we cannot articulate in Turkish. But anyway, we understand what he's talking about. The heavens are an adorned place, an adorned and firmly built place with magnificent, constellations or towers from which stones can be cast, right? So he is building the imagery in our minds here, but we need to put that imagery in the background and continue to understand this sentence itself. These heavens, right, that are in effect adorned fortresses with magnificent constellations, are also filled with conscious creatures who have comprehension. That is what makes sense. That is what we can expect. That is what reality entails. Because the reality we observe is that everything is created by the same creator, and there are certain ways, certain patterns in which he creates. In the tradition, these are called adatullah or sunnatullah, God's custom. God's custom that we can observe in the creation and verify with the Quranic injunction of Bismillah, وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا. You cannot find a change in God's custom, right? You cannot find God's custom being changed. You cannot find change in God's custom. So if this is the case, when we observe these patterns in one place, we can expect it to continue into other places. This was the line of thinking we used extensively in the 10th word too, for instance. So we understand from this that the earth is filled with conscious, living, conscious beings that are appreciating, sensing, benefiting from, and appreciating God's majesty, beauty, and perfection as manifest on earth. And since we can see from here in the firmament, the heavens should also be filled with living, conscious beings who can sense, benefit from, and appreciate God's creation and the manifestation of His majesty, beauty, and perfection in His creation. Onlar dahi ins ve cin gibi şu alem sarayının seyircileri ve şu kainat kitabının mütalacıları ve şu saltanat-ı rububiyetin dellallarıdırlar. Çünkü kainatı had ve hesaba gelmeyen tezyinat ve mehasin ve nukuş ile süslendirip tezyin etmesi bilbedahe mütefekkir istihsan edici ve mütehayyir takdir edicilerin enzarını ister. Like people and the jinn here on earth, they too, those inhabitants of the heavens, too, are spectators of this palace of the realm. They are careful readers of this book of the cosmos, and they are proclaimers of this lordly royal power, because it is known with intuitive clarity that his beautification and adornment of the cosmos with boundless and innumerable adornments, beauties, and embroideries demand the gazes of reflecting, thinking, contemplating, admiring, and marveling appreciators. That is how the loop closes. Evet, hüsn elbette bir aşık ister. Taam ise aç olana verilir. Halbuki ins ve cin şu nihayetsiz vazifeye, şu haşmetli nezarete ve şu vüs'atli ubudiyete karşı milyondan birisini ancak yapabilir. Demek bu nihayetsiz ve mütenevvi vezaife ve ibadata nihayetsiz melaike envaı ve ruhaniyat ecnası lazımdır. Yes, of course, beauty demands a lover. Beauty demands a lover. As for food, it is given to the hungry. Of course, this is setting a logic before our minds, right? If there is food put on a table, you expect that there will be people coming. You walked into a house, right? You went to visit a friend. You rang the bell, the door opened, you went inside, and in the living room you see on this like big dining table a feast, several courses of food. A beautiful feast is prepared. Maybe there is a vase with flowers in it, and everything is cleaned and well organized. You sit down, and of course you assume, and rightfully, that your friend is expecting somebody to come and eat, right? You would ask, who is coming? Perhaps you can say, like, did I bother you? Is it okay that I walk in? You, as soon as you see the dining table organized with and adorned in the way that it is, you understand that your friend is expecting guests. There will be people who will be coming, and they will be hungry, and they will be eating. This is what makes sense. So then you look around, you see all this beauty in the creation. Then you need to say, okay, this is the cognitive pattern that needs to be working. Can this be for nothing? So much beauty, so much symmetry and organization, orderliness, proportionality, that indicate that there is an intention, there is a purposefulness in the creation of all of this, in the beautification of all of this. It cannot be for nothing. In the way that when you walk into your friend's house and found the dining table filled with food and beautiful flowers, etc., you then need to understand that the beautification of this earth and heavens, etc., is for a purpose. Beauty demands a lover. Food is given to the hungry. All these provisions on earth, right? All this food, all these plants, all these insects for birds, planktons for some fish, etc. All of this demand that there will be those who will be benefiting them, who will be eating them. Yet, in the face of this unlimited duty, of partaking from that provision and appreciating that beauty, in the face of all this unlimited duty, because there's so much beauty and so much provision in the universe, the sublime task, in the face of this sublime task of viewing and this broad worshipful slavehood, humans and the jinn can fulfill only 1 out of 1,000,000. We can have a universal intention and say, oh God, we glorify you for everything that you have created, for all the stars that you have created, for all the fish in the water that you have created, for all the elements that you have created, for all the molecules in the air that you have created, etc. We can have this intention, but actually seeing that, appreciating that, showing appreciation and gratitude for that, etc., we are limited in that sense, right? We should have that universal intention. That is the secret for us to expand the scope of our worshipful slavehood, But beyond that, the actual seers, actual beholders and appreciators, we cannot get there. Now, that we have that universal intention is also important, even though we do not see, we do not sense, we do not know about some of this beauty, majesty, and perfection and provision, etc., because we as human beings are in a unique situation to be able to appreciate what we appreciate with this capacity of, partial human choice, limited choice. We can choose between good and bad, ugly and beautiful, etc. So that too is important. But aside from that, there needs to be, like the wisdom entails, reality as we know reality entails, that there should be those creatures, conscious living beings out there who will see them and appreciate them. And the humans and the jinn can fulfill only 1 out of a million of that. What? Unlimited duty, sublime task of viewing, and broad worshipful slavehood that we would expect from all the beauty, perfection, and majesty that is in the creation. In that case, these unlimited and variegated duties and worships require unlimited types of angels and species of spiritual beings. We call them angels and species of spiritual beings. Bazı rivayatın işaratıyla ve intizam-ı alemin hikmetiyle denilebilir ki, bir kısım eczam-ı seyyare, seyyarattan tut ta katarata kadar bir kısım melaikenin merakibidirler. Onlar bunlara izni ilahi ile binerler, alemi şehadete seyredip gezerler. Hem denilebilir ki bir kısım eczam-ı hayvaniye, hadiste tuyurun hudrun tesmiye edilen cennet kuşlarından tut ta sineklere kadar bir cins ervahın tayyareleridirler. Onlar bunların içine emri hak ile girerler. Alem-i cismaniyatı seyran edip o cesetlerdeki hasselerin pencereleriyle cismani mucizatı fıtratı temaşa ederler. It can be said, right? So here Ustad Nursi leaves some room for hypothesizing. It can be said. He's not saying it's definitely the case, but it can be said. We can understand this in this way. It can be said, according to what some narrations point to, and according to the wisdom that the realm's orderliness entails, that some flying objects, from the planets all the way to raindrops, are the mounts of some angels. So imagine this. One instance, you are living in a world where when it rains, it is H2O, water that's falling from the sky in drops, in little masses of water is falling from the sky. In another, when you look at it from the perspective of a world that is created by a wise, all-knowing creator who does nothing without purpose. Everything he does has sublime purposes, right? You look and you see raindrops falling accompanied by appointed angels who are riding them, who are mounting them, and traveling through the atmosphere as they fall, appreciating the beauty, majesty, and perfection of their creator. This next instant, now you are living in a world that is filled with angels and spiritual beings, and that is filled with meaning, and that is filled with comprehending, beings with comprehension that comprehend those meanings and appreciate those meanings. It can be said, according to what some narrations point to, and according to the wisdom that the realm's orderliness entails, that some flying objects from the planets all the way to raindrops are the mounts of some angels. With divine permission, they mount on these and spectate the seen realm traveling through it. Furthermore, it can be said that some animal bodies, the bodies of some animals, from paradisical birds named tuyurun khudrun, green birds. So this is mentioned in the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ says that some shuhada, their spirits enter into the bodies of these green birds in paradise, and they travel through the paradise, beholding it, appreciating it, soaking the beauty up. From paradisical birds named tuyurun khudrun, green birds in the prophetic tradition, all the way to flies. These are the airplanes of some types of spiritual beings. The way we board airplanes and go from place to place. Also imagine that your airplane has really big windows from which you can watch everything, observe everything. These spiritual beings, these angels, are boarding the flying objects and the bodies of some animals, maybe from paradisical birds to the flies, and they are traveling. They enter these with the command of the real God, right? The real is one of the names of God, and they travel around the physical realm, spectating the physical miracles of innate nature. Physical miracles of innate nature. What does that mean? Things that blinded science attributes to material relationships called causes. In fact, they are miracles. Spring has come to where I live. We have daffodils blooming. That these daffodils, when there was nothing in winter, right? All of a sudden, within a few days, shoot out from those little bulbs under the soil, grow those leaves, and then flowers blossom on top. Beautiful, as if they are smiling to us. Right? This is a miraculous thing. It is part of the innate nature, i.e., it is an aspect of the way things are created. Okay, but it is miraculous because if I were to look for the force that makes this possible in the bulb, or in the soil, or in the temperature of the air, or the angle of the sunlight, or wherever in this limited material world, in the box of this world, I would not be able to find that force. I can relate one thing to another, that to another, that to another. In the end, I'll either end up with a vicious circle that, I will have to be saying that A causes B, B causes C, C causes D, D causes F, and F causes A. So I have a vicious circle that does not take me anywhere. Or I will have to keep, perhaps looking in the smaller substance, and then in the end, I'll end up with nothing. All matter, the physicists now say that all matter is energy. These waves moving constantly. All matter is condensed energy. So what is energy then? Where is the force that moves energy, that mobilizes energy coming from? If I were to look for the force of this in here, I would not be able to find it. So therefore, it is miraculous. The human being and everything in the creation in the creation, and especially in this seen realm that we are looking and observing, none of that has the capacity to account for this. So we are incapacitated. That's miracle. That's the definition, one of the definitions of miracle. We are incapacitated to bring this about. All of us in this physical realm. None of us is able to account for what is happening here. There has to be a force that is affecting this externally. There has to be a force external to the created realm that is affecting what is happening in the created realm. And we call that the necessary being. We call it God. Right? That is God. Therefore, the blooming of flowers, the blooming of trees, the circumambulation of the earth around the sun, that the sun is emanating heat and light. All of these are miracles of innate nature, but because they are taking place in the physical realm, they are physical miracles of innate nature, but they are still miracles. So those spiritual beings mount the bodies of these animals, and with the command of the real, they travel around the physical realm, spectating the physical miracles of innate nature through the windows of the sensory faculties of those bodies, through the eyes of the fly, through the tongue of the chimpanzee, through the nose of the deer. Conscious spiritual beings spectate the physical miracles of innate nature. Elbette kesafetli topraktan ve kuduretli sudan mütemadiyen letafetli hayatı ve nuraniyetli zevil idraki halk eden Halık'ın elbette ruha ve hayata münasip şu nur denizinden ve hatta zulmet bahrinden bir kısım zişur mahlukları vardır. Hem çok kesretli olarak vardır. Melaike ve ruhaniyatın vücutlarına dair nokta namında bir risalemde ve 29. sözde 2 kere 2 4 eder derecesinde bir katiyetle ispat edilmiştir. Eğer istersen ona müracaat et. Of course, the Creator who creates subtle life and luminous possessors of comprehension from dense earth and turbid water, of course, has some conscious creatures made from the sea of light and even the sea of darkness as befits spirit and life. Of course. Why of course? Because we already established there you cannot find change in God's custom. If He creates in this way here on earth, serving a certain wisdom, and that wisdom, it makes sense that wisdom should continue to be effective in the heavens, right? Of course, the Creator who creates subtle life and luminous possessors of comprehension from dense earth and turbid water here on earth. Of course, dense earth and turbid water, we are all that. 70-something% water, and then animals and human beings, 70-something% water for human beings, and then the rest is elements. What is earth? All the elements are in the earth. Earth is the combination of all these elements. Of course, He has some conscious creatures made from the sea of light and even the sea of darkness. So on earth, what we find is water and earth. What do you find in space? Yes, there are elements there too, and there will be things created from elements over there too. They don't have to be like us, right? When we say life, people are searching for life in the universe, in space, and they are looking for planets that look like Earth, or satellites that look like Earth. That's fine. There may be perhaps animals. I don't know if there is or not, right? I can say that there won't be human beings because that is a unique situation that is, as we will see later, special to the earth, right? There may be animals, there may be insects, there may be bacteria, there may be other things. But that still is very limited. If you compare the space between planets and the mass that the planets and other celestial bodies have in this entire universe, there's a lot more space. What fills that space? Light and also darkness. Now, what is that darkness? We don't really know. It is not nothing. Some scientists now say that there is this thing called dark matter, which is probably accounting for upwards of like 90% of whatever is out there. And it is dark because we cannot sense it, we cannot see it, we cannot hear it. We know that it is there only because of the consequences of it being there, such as certain gravitational calculations, etc. Now, this is a theory. It may be right. If it is right, we know that that darkness is also something. But even if it were not something that we understand what we understand something to be, a physical object, even if it is not a physical object, there still is something. And it makes sense that God has some conscious creatures made from the sea of light, the space, universe, like sea of light. There's light everywhere. All these stars are emanating light, and that light is traveling in all directions. And even the sea of darkness, as befits spirit and life. In fact, he has them in multitudes. Not in one or two here and there, in multitudes. It is not difficult to his power. He can create one, he can create billions, he can create innumerable. And if they are serving a wisdom, it makes sense that he creates them in multitudes. In one of my treatises, of course, Ustad Nursi is writing this, right? Titled Dot, and in the 29th word, the existence of angels and spiritual beings is proven with the certainty of 2 + 2 = 4. Inshallah, there will come the time and we will read that too. If you wish, consult that. So this is the first step, and we will move to the second step. I'm not sure if you will be able to complete it or not, but we will try. Zemin ile gökler bir hükümetin iki memleketi gibi birbirine alakadardırlar. Ortalarında ehemmiyetli irtibat ve mühim muameleler vardır. Zemine lazım olan ziya, hararet ve bereket ve rahmet gibi şeyler semadan geliyor, yani gönderiliyor. Vahye istinad eden bütün edyan-ı semaviyenin icmaı ve şuhuda istinad eden bütün ehli keşfin tevatürüyle melaike ve ervah semadan zemine geliyorlar. Now we talked about this parallel between the earth and the heavens. We are going to go deeper about that now. The earth and the heavens are related to one another like two lands under the administration of the same government. There are significant connections and important transactions happening between them. Things like the light, heat, blessing, and mercy are coming from the heavens. That is, they are being sent. Here on earth, we need light, heat, blessing, mercy. Things like light, heat, blessing, and mercy are coming from the heavens. That is, they are being sent. Imagine what would happen if it were not for the sunlight and the heat coming from the sun here on earth. What would happen? Nothing. I mean, in terms of life that we know life as, right? This would not be possible. This is one of the elements, one of the causes, means rather, involved in the existence of life on this earth. It is coming from the heavens. But what is coming from the heavens is not limited to physical light and physical heat. Blessing and mercy are also coming from the heavens. And we cannot measure this with an instrument that can have levels from like 100 to 1 to 100. So today the blessing forecast is 35. Now we cannot say that, right? But we know that there's blessing and mercy coming from the heavens. Look at the flowers. Look at this is one of my favorite examples, and I've used it many times here before, right? We all need nutrition. We all need nutrition. Where do we get the nutrition? We have one tiny seed of, let's say, wheat. We throw it in the soil, give it water, etc. It comes out, and from that single seed, we get 100 seeds of wheat. And then we grind it and we make it into flour. And then we also have salt. We also have spices. We also have this. We also have that. We cook it. We make it into bread. And it smells delicious. It also tastes delicious, especially if it is fresh. Now, this is something that we need. We need to eat it for our survival. It is nutrition. We cannot survive without nutrition. So we would have eaten it, even if it did not taste like anything, or even if it tasted, horrible. If this was the only nutrition that was provided to us, we would just eat it. We would force ourselves and eat it. We would hold our nose, close our eyes, and ingest it. No, that's not the case. We are not only provided, we are provided with these delicious, beautiful, precious items of nutrition. That is mercy. That is blessing. That one seed became 100 is blessing. That the bread smells and tastes delicious is mercy. So we are living in blessing and mercy, and it is coming from the heavens. That is, they are being sent. According to the consensus of all heavenly religions, which rely on revelation, and according to the broad authentication of all people of openings, people who can see the inner dimension of things, who rely on observations, the angels and spirits come to earth from the heavens. Like blessing, like light, like heat, like mercy, angels and spirits are coming to earth from the heavens. Sometimes some of those angels are bringing mercy down. They, in some cultures, Muslim cultures, they don't say rain, and they have the word rain, but instead of rain they say rahmah. That's certainly in Turkey. They say it is raining rahmah. It is raining mercy. Why? Because with rain, life comes forth. And therefore we see the mercy in that. We see the blessing in that. They also say barakat, baraka, blessing. Blessing is raining. It's not rain that rains, it is blessing and mercy that is raining. According to the consensus of all heavenly religions, religions that rely on revelation, and the broad authentication of all people of openings who rely on observations, the angels and spirits come to earth from the heavens. How do we know? Well, this is what makes sense. They should exist. Okay, they should exist. How can we know about them? Well, I cannot. I do not have the means to perceive them, but it makes sense in my mind that it is there, it should be there. Okay? And then there are these sources that say they know, they have observed it, they have the truth about it. Then I look. If what they are conveying makes sense, I take it, because I know that this is all fitting together. And what they are conveying makes sense. They are saying they are coming from the heavens. Bundan hisse garip bir hadsi kat'i ile bilinir ki, sekene-i arz için semaya çıkmak için bir yol vardır. Sekene-i arz için semaya çıkmak için bir yol vardır. Evet, nasıl herkesin akıl ve hayal ve nazarı her vakit semaya gider, öyle de ağırlıklarını bırakan ervah-ı enbiya ve evliya ve cesetlerini çıkaran ervah-ı emvat izni ilahi ile oraya giderler. Madem hiffet ve letafet bulanlar oraya giderler, elbette cesedi misali giyen ve ervah gibi hafif ve latif bir kısım sekene-i arz ve hava semaya gidebilirler. It is understood from this with a definitive immediate apprehension. So this is hadz-i kat'i. Hadz is when you grasp something without even having to think about it. Somewhere Said Nursi defines it as like this lightning speed comprehension. You look, you see, you hear, and immediately, without even having to reason, you grasp it. It is a capacity, it's a skill, it's a faculty that is given to the human being. And sometimes it is hadz-i kat'i, definitive, immediate apprehension. Right? It leaves no room for doubt or dubiousness. It is understood from this with a definitive immediate apprehension, which can almost be perceived by the senses. So when it is hads, you don't perceive it with the senses. You are not observing it happening before your eyes, but you connect things to one another. And it is so definitive in this case that it is as if you are observing that there is a pathway for the inhabitants of the earth to rise to the heavens. How so? So we said this is understood with a definitive immediate apprehension. Let's try to make this concrete with an example. Let's say we are exploring some uncharted territory. We are on the land. We saw a lake, and then we saw a little brook bringing water into the lake. Water is flowing into the lake from this little brook. We immediately understand, with the experience that we have and with the intellect we have, we understand with an immediate apprehension, not even having to think about this, like reason this led to this led to that. We understand with an immediate apprehension that this brook is coming from a source of water, and if we followed it, if we were able to go through all the little channels that it flows through, if we followed it, we would reach the source of water. So the way that there is a channel, a pathway that has been opened from the source of water to us, if this water is flowing through that channel, there is a pathway for us to go through that channel and reach the source. If we are able to travel through the path that the water is traveling, like sometimes it may disappear under the ground and we may have to go underground, and then it comes back up and goes through a very dense forest. We have to be able to go through the very dense forest. If we have the capacity, physical ability to go through all those different possibilities on the pathway of the water, we can reach the source. So if we understand, right, if these angels and spiritual beings are coming down to earth, that means there's a pathway. We as human beings, ordinary human beings, who are bound to our physical corpses, may not be able to get there, right? But that doesn't mean that the pathway is not there. The pathway exists. So once we ascertain that the pathway exists, the next question becomes, is there a way for us to follow this pathway up to the heavens? So Ustad Nursi says, yes, as everybody's intellect, imagination, and sight reach the heavens at all times. Oh, so it is not necessarily the physical bodies. We have intellect, we have imagination, and we have sight. We do reach the heavens with our intellect, imagination, and sight. Now, this is before the age of space exploration. At the time that Ustad Nursi was writing this, there were no spaceships, there were no satellites. The airplane was the highest we had been able to go up, right? But that there is space exploration does not mean that we have exhausted the heavens either. We are still, probing the first of the 7 heavens. We don't even know exactly where the first one finishes, the second one starts, and then the second one finishes, the third one starts. We don't know. We know that there are 7 heavens, but where exactly they are, we don't know. But what we know at the time, and now too, is that we can use our intellect to think about and grasp realities about the heavens. So that's one thing. We can use our imagination. We can sometimes get it right, sometimes not get it right, but we can still use our imagination, and we can also use our sight. And now that that sight has been expanded tremendously with the use of telescopes, and that existed at the time of Ustad Nursi too, but now we have significantly more powerful telescopes, right? Everybody's intellect, imagination, and sight reach the heavens at all times. So this is one. This is one way to travel through that pathway. Not our entity would not be traveling, our spirit or body would not be traveling, but there is a way. There is a way. As everybody's intellect, imagination, and sight reach the heavens at all times, in like fashion, the spirits of prophets and saints who leave their weights behind. So why can't the intellect reach there? Because it is not weighted down by physical substances. It could have been the case, right? In order to think, we could have been using physical substance, and the thought could be attached, and it would be impossible for it to exist without that attachment. Now, that is not the case, and therefore it's very difficult to imagine, but if you think carefully about it, you will see that it is possible. The intellect could be weighted down and could not go to places beyond, let's say, 10 meters, 10 kilometers, whatever, beyond what a person can walk in one day. It could be similar to our bodies. It could be limited in the way that our hearing is limited. We cannot hear things under a certain decibel that are further than a certain distance. But that's not the case. The intellect is not weighted. The imagination is not weighted. Sight, well, there are limitations to sight, but it is still very expansive compared to many other senses. Let's say the sense of smell and hearing and touching and tasting, right? In part because it is activated by what comes from far away, and light is the thing that travels the fastest that we know. Yes, as everybody's intellect, imagination, and sight reach the heavens at all times, in like fashion, the spirits of prophets and saints who leave their weights behind, and the spirits of dead people who strip their corpses off, go there with divine permission. So that one thing that we understand from this is that it is possible to leave this weight behind. The weightiness of worldly existence. The Prophet ﷺ traveled through the entire creation in his prophetic ascension, in his Mi'raj. How? We don't know exactly how. We know that he was there, spirit and body. How can that be possible? If God wills, it can be possible. He can give a subtlety to the body that the body can travel with the spirit. Now, without the body, the spirit itself is a subtle thing. It is so subtle that it can travel, and it does travel. When we sleep, for instance, the spirit leaves the body. Now, it still maintains a connection with the body. When we die, that connection is severed. But when we sleep, it is like half death. The spirit leaves the body, or is able to leave the body, but maintaining a connection. How do we know? Because when you poke the person who is sleeping, the input from those senses, or when you talk to the person, when you call the person who is sleeping, the input from those senses through the ear, through touch. Sometimes if you hold bright light into the eyes of a person, the input from the sense of sight, right? It is communicated to the spirit, and therefore the spirit, based on the intensity of this sensation, comes back and rejoins. So it is, if you will, just as an analogy to make it easier for us, perhaps, it is like a balloon that filled with helium and tied to a string. The balloon flies away, but there is the string, and when you pull the string, the balloon comes back down, right? When it is death, that string is cut, and then it cannot come back down. It's gone. You cannot connect it back together. If God wills, He can, right? But that's a different question. So prophets and saints who leave their weights behind become like spiritual, become subtle. And the spirits of dead people who strip their corpses off the physical, worldly weight, they can travel there with divine permission. Since those who attain lightness and subtlety go there, of course some inhabitants of the earth and the air whose corpses are made of similitudes and who are light and subtle like spirits can go to the heavens. So among human beings, those who attain lightness and subtlety, like prophets and saints, and then the spirits of human beings, which is itself subtle, can go there. Of course, some inhabitants of the earth, and here we are in the domain of what we called at the beginning angels and spiritual beings. We don't know exactly what they are, but we know that they exist. Like those angels that we said mount the raindrops and come down to earth. Now, angels and spiritual beings being subtle, they don't need exertion to go up to the heavens. So it's possible for them to go there. So the gist of this step, we said there are 7 steps with which we can understand or we can climb to the firmament of this verse that we recited at the beginning. This is the second step. The gist of this step is that there is constant exchange between the earth and the heavens. And it makes sense that this exchange is taking place, and there is evidence from what we observe in the physical realm. There is evidence that it is taking place in the metaphysical realm. So inshallah, we will end there and continue with the third step in the next episode. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.